Thank you very much, Teresa. And from New York, good evening, good night to everybody. Good morning, Rome, and good morning, the rest of the world. It's great to be here again on the third of the position papers. And this evening, we are going to do the position paper on the girl child. Let me now see, can I screen share? Yes. So as we have been doing, and I have kept to again saying that we will unpack the position paper on the girl child. And this will lead us to a deeper understanding of structural and systemic injustices. And these particularly with regard to the situation of the girl child. So that the issue can be integrated into Good Shepherd programs and advocacy. So that's the purpose of what we're about this evening. And when we speak about the girl child, I feel very strongly that if we as a congregation took a very strong position on the girl child, we would actually be changing the whole dynamics around gender inequality and ensuring that gender justice came about. So, as I have it here, I'm saying the impacts of gender inequality begin with the birth of a girl. And even before, if there's an opportunity to know the sex of the fetus. And why is this? And it's generally because daughters are an economic burden on the family, and daughters do not contribute to the family income, and because boys are valued. And just in the very notion of boys being valued over girls, we have already the structure of injustice and of gender inequality. And what are the consequences? For the girl child, before she's born, she's aborted. Female infanticide, which is the killing of the newborn child. The girl child is left to die. The girl child is less likely to receive proteins and the nutrients necessary for growth and development. They're more likely to be denied education. They're more likely to be married off early. Girls become mothers while children themselves. And even in some cases, girls become widows while children. So what a burden and what an injustice for a girl who might be still a child and has had all these experiences heaped upon her. So what does this mean? And I'm taking from paragraph 2 of the position paper, lines 8 and 9, which says violations occur with impunity and often accepted as cultural, religious, and/or traditional norms. Impunity means with no consequences for the people who do these actions towards the girl child. And it's often accepted, as I say, culturally, religiously, and or as traditional norms. harmful practices. The term covers forms of violence or ritual discrimination, primarily committed against girls and women, and they have become culturally normalized. That's the way it's done. That's the way the girl should be. That's the way the girl should behave. That's the way she's married off early. So it becomes normal in the culture to do it. And these harmful practices are embedded in mindsets, promoting and upholding patriarchy. So they're normalized in the culture, and they're actually in the mindset of people. And these harmful practices uphold patriarchy. They favor the rule of men and boys. They are embedded, as I said, in the culture, in the tradition, and in religion. And they're rooted in structures and systems that oppress others. Now, just to look at structures and systems. A social structure can be said to be unjust when the rules perpetrated through it persistently disadvantage some social group vis-a-vis others. And in this case, girls are disadvantaged over and against boys. So the rules in the structure give advantage to some and disadvantage to others. And when we look at systemic issues and systemic injustice, systemic injustice permeates every level of society, and it's upheld in the social system and affects whole groups, even society as a whole, the economy, the judiciary, governments, and includes the church. Churches, I should say churches. Systemic injustice ripples throughout society and often involves subtle attitudes and choices. And notice I have that in red, subtle attitudes and choices, which are not directly motivated by hatred or malice, but they're there in the unconscious, in the subconscious, and we don't become aware of them until we're brought face to face with the issues. So these obstacles, these systemic obstacles or barriers, they're policies and practices or procedures that result in some people receiving unequal access or being excluded. So we can ask, what are the policies and practices and procedures that result in the girl child's low status in the country or within a specific group? And having asked what are these policies and practices or procedures, oftentimes they are unspoken. They're carried in the culture, in the government structures, in the family, in religion, and they're passed from one generation to the next. So we're going to just, I'm going to read this question for you, and we're going to pause in terms of if you want to ask any questions about what we have said so far. And my question is, to what extent do I, or do you, or do all of us together, through our attitudes and behaviors, our unreflected actions, promote or perpetuate unjust systems and structures that demean the girl child, not recognize her inherent dignity or infringe her human rights. So to what extent do I do it? Through my attitudes, behaviors, and unreflected attitudes. And then how do we shift the discourse? How do we move to empowering the girl child? How do we move towards ensuring that her rights are upheld? So I'd like to just pause here and hear from some of you, either your agreement or disagreement, or you're asking a question for clarification.
If anyone has a question, please state your name first and then ask the question.
Hi, Winifred. This is Julia.
Hello, Julia.
I want to, you know, if you could kindly elaborate a little bit on the earlier slides. You mentioned about girls become widows while children. What does that mean?
So a girl, and
Yeah.
when we talk about a girl, it's somebody under 18 years of age.
Yes.
That girl can have been, she's still a child.
Okay.
She can have been married as a child.
Ah.
She can have become a mother as a child. And if she was married to an older man, oftentimes he dies.
Yes.
And so she's a widow.
All right. Thank you so much.
So thank you for the question, because I'm sure if you had the question, many other people had it too. So, you know, it's great to clarify it. So it means that she has the experience of being a bride, of being a mother, and of her husband dying. And she's still a child herself.
Okay. Yes. Yes. That's
Thank
clear.
you.
Thank you. Yes. For the reflection paper, the reflection question, my experience when I was in China with Pamela way back in 2000, that was the experience of girls who were, you know, treated very unequally. We were trying to put them back in school, this girl and her brother, and they were staying with her aunt. And what happened was, when we were there, we managed to put them back to school. However, because she was helping out with selling fruits, her auntie, when we were out of China for a short break, she was being taken out of school right away, giving all sorts of excuses, saying that she's not bright, she's, you know, all kinds of excuses. And eventually she said, oh, after all, she's going to get married, and that's it. You know, so this is very real. Yes. Thank you.
And so to just follow on your question, Julia, then when we meet this in the community, how do we change these actions and behaviors and unthought of consequences that are cultural patterns and structures? How do we change that in the community? I think that's what I mean there about how do we shift the discourse?
Hi, my name is Pochu.
Hello to you.
Yeah, I think for me, through our experience here, I think one of the ways that we tend to perpetuate such behavior is because we don't speak up ourselves. There's this lack of tendency to talk about the issue. You use the word unspoken. I think in many times in our missioning and in working and in kind of like developing the work that we are doing, we always talk about this need to raise awareness, this need to give a voice to the issue. And sometimes we ourselves do not have that courage to do that, because when we work in a community, there's this whole process of building the rapport, getting used to the community getting used to us. I personally, I often struggle with how do we break this whole vicious cycle of perpetuation, you know? Because when you work in communities, you know, and we want to talk about the rights of the girl child, you know, etc. The sphere of influence are the parents, you know. Mothers, I believe, to a lot of extent, perpetuate also the situation. So how then do we break this whole cycle? I think that's something that I grapple with on the ground, you know, and you talk about shifting the discourse. I think the only way you can shift the discourse, you know, is through awareness, through an opening up the issue, you know, that it's not a culture of silence, you know, speak when we need to speak, and that's a process, you know, that requires time. It requires sustainable effort and a lot of zeal, I must say, you know, to pursue that advocacy, if we are looking at it in that way. So generally, I think if we ourselves speak up about the issue, if we ourselves are clear about the issues and we commit and believe in the issue, then we should have the courage, you know, to speak in our interactions with the community, be it a small group or even within our own organization, you know, to consciously point out, you know, the injustices experienced by the girl child, whether it is in terms of actions, whether it's in terms of portrayal, you know, whether it's also in terms of experiences. So I believe it starts with us, you know, and it starts with our own commitment to the issue. How much do we believe, you know, in the dignity of the girl child? And if we believe in it, then we must do something about it. And to do something about it, you know, is to talk about it firstly. Yeah, I think that would be the first step. Thank you.
I have nothing more to add to what you've said. I think you're spot on in terms of, you know, the parents carry the culture, and then we're working with the girls. So how can we engage the parents and the girls together? Because somewhere I think we have to do both, but it's a challenging work. And it's a difficult one. And sometimes it's easier to keep quiet than to begin to talk about it. And of course, there's also the fact that we need to be comfortable ourselves with the issues that we're bringing up so that we don't feel threatened. So somewhere we need to have worked through these issues and spoken about them among ourselves so as to gain skills and gain knowledge in terms of going to the wider community. I think in the interest of time, we're going to move on. Is that okay, Teresa?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the questions, and we'll have more opportunities. So I'm moving now to a point in the position paper. It's actually number 6, which is the second part of the position paper. And it's talking about 6E, it's paragraph E. And it says, we participate in and lead when possible. And we're engaged in networks, campaigns, and public outreach activities for girls' rights advocacy to ensure political visibility and voice for girls and all children. So kind of having surfaced the issue, how do we change the narrative? And it has to do with, yes, what Po Chu was talking about in terms of speaking with the girls themselves, but also engaging in broader networks and campaigns. And is so that we become visible at the political level. and that we're always championing the voice of the girl and helping the girl to be her own advocate. And it says also that we promote community observance of October 11, the International Day of the Girl Child, and empowerment and education about human rights for girls are essential strategies. So as I move ahead, we're going to be filling out some of these points. I came across this, and I think it puts it together nicely, talking about the Girls' Bill of Rights. And the links are there that you can kind of explore a bit when you get the PowerPoint. So the Global Bill of Rights for Girls focuses on these 10 aspects: free quality education, equality, involvement in decision-making and access to leadership positions, documentation, that means having her birth certificate and other documents that she might need, comprehensive sexual education, and access to free quality reproductive health care, protection from harmful practices, and the enjoyment of positive cultural practices. So trying to distinguish what's positive in the culture and what's negative, and ensuring that she has a good sense of her own culture in terms of positive practices. Safety from all forms of violence, decision-making about her body and sexuality, protection under the law without fear of or unequal treatment, and freedom from exploitation. So these 10 points are outlined, and we can fit in wherever we want various aspects around working with girls and ensuring that girls have their rights. So from paragraph 3 of the position paper, I want to highlight: when the value of girls is recognized, when their needs are met and their voices amplified, girls contribute to positive change in their families, local communities, nations, and the world. So this is a very positive statement around girls. And it's very important that their voices are amplified. And when that happens, they themselves contribute to the positive change in their families, local communities, nations, and the world. And this might also be answering the question that Pochu brought up in terms of how do we do it. In actual fact, the girls themselves are the change makers. Now, with regard to networks, there are a number of networks around that do significant work with girls and for girls. And among them is Plan International. And their campaign that they launched in 2018 is Girls Get Equal. And it's interesting, they're not focusing on a single issue like education or health or end child marriage, but aiming to change the way girls are valued in society so that they no longer have to face injustice and oppression. Girls themselves confront stereotypes. It is about power, leadership, and youth-led actions to advance girls' rights. and gender equality. So I find this interesting, moving from the single issue to taking on, as it were, more holistically, girls and girls' role in society, and to aim at changing the way they are seen and the way they are valued. And girls do it for themselves if we give them the tools, if we help them to understand what's going on and to do the analysis around systems and structures. That's just creating a new world with new rules, some of the taglines that plan have. So having said that now, I'm going to move to looking at two big issues around girls. One is child early and forced marriage, and the other is a female genital mutilation. Now, many girls in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa are married, some as young as 7 years of age, and often below 15 years and between 15 and 18. And when a girl gets married before 18 years of age, it's usually a case of child early and forced marriage. With regard to the female genital mutilation, it most commonly occurs in Africa and the Middle East, but it's also occurring in Malaysia and Indonesia and Singapore. It is prevalent or happens throughout Asia Pacific, but in the countries that I mentioned, it is an issue that needs to be addressed. Across the globe, and I took this from the position paper, it's paragraph 2, lines 4 to 8. It says, across the globe, low value placed on girl-child subjects, subjects her to specific forms of violence, prenatal sex deselection, infanticide, disregard for birth registration, denial of nutrition, genital mutilation, sometimes called for short FGM, sexual harassment, denial of education, sexual abuse, use as objects in prostitution, and forced and early marriage. So this is a kind of the list of all the injustices that happen to the girl child. And I was bringing it in there to make the link that the FGM is mentioned in the position paper. Now, there's an NGO in Malaysia called ARROW, and they have done a study on child marriage in South Asia. And there is, you have the link there for it in terms of looking at international and constitutional legal standards and jurisprudence for promoting accountability and change. Other than to mention to you the fact of child marriage and that it does happen in South Asia, and to give you this resource, I'm not going to say much more on it. The minimum age of marriage is 18, and also this issue of child marriage is taken up by Girls Not Brides, and they are also doing some work on forced marriage. So again, in terms of networking, this might be a helpful group to get to know about and to engage with. Now, there's a few points here that I think are worth reflecting on. In South Asia, a woman or girl's reproductive capacity generally is not regarded as an individual right. And I think all of us might have to stop and think, how do we look at a woman's reproductive capacity? Rather, bearing children, particularly sons, is understood as a woman's or girl's obligation to ensure the continuity of families, clans, and social groups. And a woman's fertility is considered as an appropriate object for regulation by families, religious institutions, and even government authorities. And the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, she wrote, child marriage and forced marriage are additional forms of direct abuse that regulate female sexuality. Ignoring women and young girls as individuals capable of making choices about their lives. These practices subject many women to unwanted sex and rape, thus destroying their lives and their life potential. So again, I think very directly saying how this attitude towards girls and getting them married off early, etc., highlighting the injustice it is, and that it ignores a person's individual rights. It ignores the whole fact that one's sexuality and reproductive capacity is an individual right. And then the arrow also is seeking out and addressing the issue of female genital mutilation in Asia. And they have done some studies around it. I'm not sure, I'm sure you in Malaysia would be aware of the group. And they have the Asian Network to End FGM/C, which means cutting. So there has been a move to not use FGM, female genital mutilation, as a term, or to refer to it as cutting. So the Asian Network to End FGM/C is a collaboration between the Orchid Project and Malaysian-based regional feminist NGOs, the Asia Pacific Resource Centre and the Research Centre for Women, with support from the Wallace Global Fund. So, as I say, just to create awareness of networks that you might need to know about. And this report only was published this March in 2020. And it highlights that India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Philippines, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Thailand have all cases in which female genital mutilation or cutting is happening. And FGM is recognized internationally as a violation of human rights of girls and women. It reflects deep-rooted inequality between the sexes and constitutes an extreme form of discrimination against women. It's nearly always carried out on minors and is a violation of the rights of children. The practice also violates a person's rights to health, security, and physical integrity, the right to be free from torture and cruel and inhumane and degrading treatment, and the right to life when the procedure results in death. And I took this from the World Health Organization in terms of summing up how FGM is a violation of human rights, and it reflects deep-rooted inequality. Now, unlike Africa, where FGM is a huge problem, in Asia, it is seen as non-harmful and is largely normalized, particularly in majority Muslim practicing countries of Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, where it is available and performed by medical professionals. But despite that, it is a violation of human rights. And in Indonesia, around 3 in 4 girls underwent a procedure when they were less than 6 months old. And it doesn't have the same impact on an infant who is 6 months old when you compare that with the trauma that is visited upon a girl who might be 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years of age, as happens in Africa. But it doesn't matter. It's a violation of the girl's human rights. And we need to be aware of it. And if we are empowering girls, we need to talk about it, and we need to ensure that this practice stops. Local structures of power and authority, such as community leaders, religious leaders, and even some medical personnel, can contribute to upholding the practice. So I put that there so that you're aware that it's not just the girl and her family. It's actually built into the community with religious leaders and community leaders and medical personnel. So how do we address that? How do we begin to talk about this issue and bring about change? And this is a map that I got. The print is very small on it, but we're not going to delay. But the darker countries are the ones where it is very prevalent. So you have Singapore and Indonesia are the 2 named here. And then in all the other countries, it is happening, and we need to be aware of it. And even in Australia. And it very often happens when people come into the country that come from other countries, that they continue to bring and to practice cultural and harmful practices that they were practicing when they were in their own country. And so even in the United States, this is an issue that is coming up currently, also with people who come in from other countries. So it is an issue that we thought was being addressed, but now it's re-emerging in different forms, and because of people migrating and because of conflict and people being displaced and climate displacement, etc., and bringing their cultural practices with them. So we're going to stop there. And again, if you have any questions or points of clarification, we can take them.
As with the previous session, if you have a question or a point, please state your name and state your question.
maybe you need time to think about it. But it doesn't matter how simple your question is, because once you ask it, it'll spark off something for somebody else. And sometimes, you know, if you're wondering, oh, should I ask it or not, you may be sure that 4 or 5 other people are very happy that you asked it. So maybe we'll take 1 or 2, even comments. I mean, are you surprised? Do you know all of this already? Have you come across the issue in terms of FGM or early marriage?
I see that there are reactions happening in the chat group. I just would like to invite 1 person or 2 from the chat group to just share with the entire big group, because it will help in the reflection.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm Nia from Indonesia.
Go ahead, Nia. Go ahead.
Winifred, I'm struck with the multi-genital cutting, because in our country in 2010 the Minister of Health already renew the regulation about the genital genital FGM.
Yes.
But in 2013, it's the regulation was removed because the leader of the Muslim people don't like to have this this regulation. So in our country, in 2006, MUI, the leader of Muslim, asked to not to allow the FGM. So I just think because it is about the religion's law, so we have to what have we do to protect the girls, especially the babies, from the FGM. Is all.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a case of all the time doing advocacy, linking it with international law, with human rights, with bodily integrity. And I'm not sure, from what I understand in terms of Islam, it depends which branch, or whether the person is more fundamentalist or more open. But the more open people in terms of Islam do not see it. They say it's not part of the Quran, it's not there. So it depends on which group are promoting it. It's a difficult issue in terms of when the country is predominantly Islamic, and yet I think we have to be aware of it and do whatever advocacy we can, because it is a violation of a girl's human rights. and it is an attack on the integrity of her body.
I want to thank Nia for that reflection. Is there anyone with another reflection? Alternatively, you could also come back to the reflections at the end of the sharing, and maybe we can proceed, Winifred.
Okay. So early on, I mentioned about the International Day of the Girl, and this came about as a result of a resolution in the General Assembly. I see I have it written down wrong. I said 2010, it's actually 2012 was when the resolution was passed. And again, it was an attempt in 2012 to highlight the importance of the girl child and to bring a certain status and recognition of who she is. And with the working group on girls, we usually have 11 days of action during October 1 to 11, celebrating the International Day. And many of you throughout Asia, I think, have contributed to this day in many ways, both in terms of preparing the prayer and in sharing with us different activities that are going on in your different countries. Malaysia, Philippines, Myanmar, Nepal, Indonesia, Singapore, India, Thailand, Australia. And some of the nice graphics were actually done by the Philippines last year when we were celebrating Girls Unscripted and Unstoppable. And so I'm just moving from highlighting the Day of the Girl to again looking at the position paper, and it's paragraph 6, and it's the last paragraph, which says we use UN human rights tools to advocate nationally and internationally. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, with its optional protocols, UN CEDAW, ought to be the basis for regular reporting using the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity NGO office in Geneva. Work for national legislation that incorporates the Palermo Protocol to prevent, suppress and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. And we are aware from the last webinar that children are trafficked, and girls are very susceptible to being trafficked. So this again is the list of conventions and international law, but I want to bring you your attention to the Convention on Consent to Marriage, the minimum age for marriage and registration of marriages. It's the second last one. Just to highlight that, it's not often referred to, but it is important to realize that there is a convention that says that people must give consent to marriage. It must be a choice, and that there's a minimum age, and that marriages should be registered. Now, some of the difficulty around following the issue of the girl child is that girls are neither women nor children. Julia already asked me what I meant when I said that a girl could be a widow and still be a child. But when we do advocacy work, we have to follow the line of women, because sometimes we find the girl child there, and then we have to follow the line of children, and sometimes we would find the girl there. So this creates a difficulty, and it contributes to girls having low status. They have low priority and are neither children nor women. They have been discriminated against. They're subject to negative cultural attitudes and practices. And girls' needs are different to boys' needs across the life cycle. And that's important to recognize. So while UNICEF for years has done work on children, it's only very recently that they're beginning to notice that and take on the aspect of the girl child and the different needs of the girl child and how they differ from boys across the life cycle. So from being a young age to becoming an adolescent and then approaching 18 years of age or maturity, different needs. As I've said to you, the girls fall between the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is owned by UNICEF and UNICEF promoted, and the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, which is CEDAW, which focuses on women. And then we also have reference to girls, and this was really where the girl child first begun to be focused on, was at the Beijing conference, the Fourth Women's Conference in Beijing, China in 1995. And then from the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, UN Women is the keeper of the Beijing Declaration, and therefore it's looked at the Commission on the Status of Women, which happens every year in New York. So the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, they had 12 platforms that they named A to L. And the last one, L, was dedicated to the girl child. And it was the beginning of the working group on girls, which we work with in New York. That group came into being at that time, and they promoted and brought forward and actually were able to get a platform for the girl child in 1995. And in the platform, there are 9 different aspects to be looked at. Eliminate all forms of discrimination against the girl child. So the issue of discrimination. Eliminate negative cultural attitudes and practices against the girl child. Promote and protect the rights of the girl child and increase awareness of her needs and potential. Eliminate discrimination against girls in education, skills development and training. Now, a lot has been done in the area of education, and up until recently, it was more or less being said that girls and boys were in school equally. But now with the COVID situation, there's great concern about girls having dropped out of school, that they will not continue after the COVID is addressed. Eliminate discrimination against girls in health and nutrition. Eliminate the economic exploitation of child labor and protect girls at work. Eradicate violence against the girl child. Promote the girl child's awareness of and participation in social, economic and political life. I find that one interesting. It has to do with empowering the girl and permitting her to be her own advocate, such that she participates in the social, economic and political life of the community and the region and the country. And lastly, strengthen the role of the family in improving the status of the girl child. So these were the points that were elaborated in 1995, and honestly, it's the same points that we are concerned about today. Data shows that the lives of girls today are better in many respects than those of preceding generations. Girls are more likely to survive childhood and attend school and complete their education, and less likely to be undernourished and to marry as children. Yet girls everywhere still face significant deprivations and inequalities as a result of persistent gender discrimination. And they're further disadvantaged based on age, poverty, disability, location, race, ethnicity, and migration status. And these all compound the barriers girls face to building fulfilling futures for themselves and to making contributions to their communities and societies. So there are a number of aspects there that I have mentioned: age, poverty, girls that have disabilities, where girls live if they're in rural areas, race, ethnicity, and migratory status. All these impact girls and girls' development. So I want to move from there to back to the position paper, which says to promote the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with central awareness of SDG 5, while incorporating awareness of how each of the 17 SDGs have implications for the welfare of girls. So it's not just the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, it's not just the CRC, we have to also take account of the Sustainable Development Goals. You're used to seeing this diagram now, so I won't have to say anything on it. And I found this chart, which is very interesting. It says the number of child-focused indicators within each of the SDG goals. So anywhere where there are points coming out, you can see where there's an indicator that affects children. So we have a lot of them there for poverty, the whole issue around nutrition, health, education, gender equality, the whole issue of sanitation and water. We didn't mention much about girls when they start menstruating and the problems that causes in terms of going to school, and if the school doesn't have toilets that are separate for girls with water, and if there aren't sanitary products, etc., all this makes it very difficult for girls in terms of going to school. We also know that girls can be caught in terms of doing agriculture and carrying water, and 7, the whole issue of energy. Getting firewood, being engaged in those tasks also rob a girl of her rights. Then SDG 8 has all to do about child labor. Then we go around to 13, which is the climate, and recognizing that they can be discriminated, that climate displacement is a factor. And then right up to 16, where there are a number of indicators, but there is one indicator which specifically says that we want to be rid of all violence towards children by 2030. So the Sustainable Development Goals give us another framework in which to work for the rights of girls. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do anything on these 2 slides. What I actually write out for you is what's in SDG 5, achieve gender equality and empowerment for all girls, end all forms of discrimination, eliminate all forms of violence, eliminate all harmful practices, recognize what the girl child contributes to unpaid care work and domestic work. 5.5 has to do with her effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in the political, economic and public life. Now it says there women, but girls also need to be involved and to use their voice at the political, economic and public life. And I think we've seen something from Greta in terms of climate change, what she has been able to do and use her voice as a girl, just one example. And then we're back again to the Beijing Platform for Action that's recognized fulfilling that. So in a sense, many of the instruments, many of the policies that are given to us are reinforcing one another. I want to highlight for you the whole issue of child protection and child safeguarding. I'm not going to delay on it, but I do want to highlight it in terms of girls and girls' rights. And I think if we will stop here for if you have any questions, and if not, I'll just continue to the end.
Winifred, I suggest that we continue till the end and take the
yes.
questions at the end.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Teresa. It's interesting that the position paper is actually quoted in the child safeguarding document about recognizing that every girl is born with dignity, that they possess the inherent rights of all humans and ought to be assured their unique rights of childhood to enable them to reach their full potential. And this is a useful document that comes out every 2 years at the United Nations. A study is done with regard to the situation of the girl child, and then the document puts out the latest update in terms of what needs to be done to address the issues of the girl child. Oftentimes it's repetition from year to year, but the last resolution was adopted in November 2019. And much of what I've said to you is what's in the document. There is a special representative of the Secretary General on violence against children. Previously it was Marta Santos Pais who was in the position. She was very favorably disposed to the work of NGOs. Now we have this lady from Morocco. She also is very dedicated to children, Najat Mala. So just so that you're aware of her position. And but the work was done before she came into the office, but she actually launched it, a document on keeping the promise, ending violence against children by 2030. And that's in keeping with SDG 16.2 to end all forms of violence against children. And of course, that includes girls. And the violence that girls suffer is very different to what boys suffer. I'm highlighting again the need for birth certification, and it comes from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. that everybody has the right to a nationality. And therefore it is coming from the resolution on the girl child that every country should ensure free or low cost birth registration for children born on their territories or their nationals abroad who would otherwise be stateless. So if children are not registered, that's what leads to people being stateless. And in the 2030 agenda, in goal 16, to provide legal identity to all, including birth registration. And this is to happen by 2030. So highlighting that. Girls with disabilities are even more vulnerable to violence and to unprotected and premature sexual relations. And they are often subjected to various forms of cultural, social, sexual, and economic exploitation and violence, abuse, rape, incest, honor-related crimes, and harmful practices. But she's even more vulnerable than the girl child. And then just the issue of how girls are impacted due to the COVID experience and the pandemic, and the fact that girls are out of school, and what happens then, they're at greater risk of exploitation, of child labor, and of gender-based violence. And when their education is interrupted, it is less likely that they return to school. And the last point I want to raise is that it should have been happening next week, the Generation Equality Forum, which was this feminist movement, global, headed by France and Mexico, to actually bring about gender equality. And they have named 6 action coalitions. Now, this is not specifically coming out of the United Nations, but the idea is that we would be all engaged. And the action coalitions have to do with gender-based violence, economic justice and rights, bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, feminist action for climate change, technology and innovation for gender equality, and feminist movements and leadership. And this is about realizing women's rights for an equal future. And Plan International have been engaged in this, and they have produced a 30-page document trying to insert girls into each of these 6 coalitions. So again, being aware of the rights of the girl child, and unless her rights are upheld, there will not be much change. And lastly, that we need to include boys, include families, boys and men in program efforts that ensure the human rights of all. And this is taken out of the position paper, because if we're not also educating boys and men, well, then change will not happen. So that brings me to the end of the presentation in terms of the girl child. I look forward to hearing any comments you may have. There are a few slides afterwards that you can look at when you get the presentation. They might help you to look at different points or give you other information. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winifred, for this very enriching and very insightful session. Thank you for bringing us through the position paper, to the situation of the girl child in all our different countries. And I think what came across very strongly is that violence towards the girl child is a multi-level systemic violence, starting from the families, into the culture, into the very fabric of our society. And what came across very strongly for us, all of us also, is that the majority of us who are here today on this webinar are women who were girls before. And we are all immersed in our own culture, and we may not realize the violence that are happening towards fellow girls, because we don't see the violence anymore when we are immersed in the culture. And so this whole systemic change begins with us as change makers before we can even attempt, as Bochu says, to voice the injustice in our own society, because it will take courage to do that. Thank you for bringing us through to the UN conventions, the Beijing platform, the Sustainable Development Goals, and all the different resources that we can find in our programs to help us in our programs. I now encourage anyone who has a question and insight to share with us.
Would like to talk. Like I liked Sister Winifred's last point. Like us Good Shepherds, mostly we concentrate and work for girls and women. Unless and until we involve boys, men in our programs, otherwise we will be speaking only our rights. We have to get our rights by taking the other gender with us, so that they know what the problems are going through and we can involve in our programs. Also, I was having one wild thought, I don't know whether it is correct. Like different countries have a different age group for marriage. For example, Nepal, I think it is 17 years. And in Muslim countries, most of the countries, the marriageable age is 16 years. And 80% of the countries, 18 years and above. So as a Good Shepherds, as we have this special status in the UN, it can be campaigned that the marriageable age can be 20 and above, so that girls have that psychological and physical maturity. Can we take this? We don't know how we can bring this change, like with the government speaking about the marriageable age, so that they are mature.
I think, Pushpa, you're mentioning what is the issue, if I can put it this way, and that is that we have the international laws, we have what is the highest, coming even from the Declaration on Human Rights. And yet to bring that to any particular community takes time, takes effort, takes perseverance, takes advocacy, takes saying it over and over again. Change does come, but it doesn't come quickly as far as I can see. And perseverance, I think it's important to realize that even if the national law says 16, even if child marriage happens before that, that the national law isn't the international standard, and that we should be advocating when elections come up, whatever, why don't you think about raising the age of marriage? Girls would be more mature, all of the kind of points that you raised there. But I think we have to do the advocacy, and it's difficult.
Thank you, Pushpa, and thank you, Winifred. We are open to hearing from anyone else.
Teresa, there is a question from chat from there. Heard recently a news report that the legal age for sexual activity in South Korea is raised from 13 to 16. So anyone can verify this. So I'm a Korean, it seems increasing the teenagers' sexual assaults and sex offense in South Korea because of the culture of sexuality. And important thing is what I have information that under the certain teenager is 59%, or most of the teenagers' sexual crime occurred by adolescents. The teenagers' crime is occurred by adolescents themselves. I think it's kind of a culture of this violence is increasing. And this is true to increasing, but it's not kind of generally to acknowledge of this increasement.
Thank you, Marie-Jean. Winifred, would you like to react to this?
I'm not sure that I quite heard everything. I'm looking here at, I see Del wrote, both our children. You see, if I understand what was being said there, it is that boys, teenage boys, are abusing teenage girls. Is that correct? Teresa, did you hear the question?
Yes, I think that was the point that was coming across, that the violation of the girl child's rights are actually perpetuated by the adolescent boys themselves.
And my question then to that is, where did the adolescent boys learn that this kind of behavior was okay? Because it has to be that they learned it from their fathers and other men that are their role models. So it comes back to, what is it that men, in terms of patriarchy, how they behave, and do they think that they can violate whoever they want, wherever they want? So that's the situation. So I know it was towards the end that I brought it in, but I think when we're educating girls, we also have to keep our eyes on what's happening with the boys, because they equally need the education. So yes, I think it happens in terms of boys having patriarchal attitudes and behaviors and operating out of that, and having a disregard in terms of the girl and in terms of women generally, seeing them as inferior, as somebody to be used, abused, somebody to be won and spoiled, and then it's a trophy for the boy or for the men. So these are the kinds of attitudes that are prevailing, that we have to kind of confront, and they're in the culture and they're unspoken. So how do we, we're back again to maybe Julia's question in the very beginning, how do we even begin to bring up this conversation and to bring about change?
Thank you, Winifred. I'm also reminded that Winifred just now shared that we need to also encourage girls to be the change makers themselves, and to encourage girls to have a voice in society. Yeah, thank you about that. And the Beijing platform also states that all our programs should also reach out to men and boys in the community. Any other reactions?
Just I would like to share is it is 20 years you need to complete to register legally in the marriage. So they have increased the age from 18 to 20 completed. So, you have to be completed. So otherwise they don't legally register the marriages. So it means they are increasing the age, and we are also promoting that with the girls and the youth we work with, to wait till 20 to get registered. So.
Is that in Nepal, Taskila?
Yes, yes, I'm talking about Nepal. You have to be completed 20. Then only the officially the marriage can be registered, or legally marriage can be registered.
Thank you, Taskila.
Yeah, I just want to pass a comment. I think culture and traditions are so strong, especially in India, a country like India and other countries also. I think we have to place human rights above cultures and traditions while educating the communities. So human rights should be the first, then only the culture and tradition should take place.
Thank you, Peter.
Agreed, but very often it's in reverse. The culture and the tradition carrying harmful practices that have been informed by patriarchy are what are prevalent. And it seems to be ever so difficult to get the basics across in terms of human rights.
Very
and
difficult.
Sometimes in terms of trying to promote human rights, promote choice, a girl's freedom, etc. Sometimes that's seen as coming from the Western perspective and Western culture. And anyway, look at women in Western society. We don't want our girls to look like that. You know, so sometimes you have this kind of debate back and forward between cultures. And very often it happens every year at the CSW, that exact debate takes place and there's never a shift. And I remember a year ago, one woman ambassador, I forget what country, Lebanon, she was from Lebanon, and she said, I'm going home and I will tell my women at home that sent me here, I tried. And she said, I will tell them I will try again and again and again. And I think that's the difficulty around bringing gender equality about is stubborn. It's really stubborn. So I think we have to keep at it. And that's why we have, you know, there's no way we can give up on gender equality. And it begins, I believe, with ensuring the rights of the girl. My perspective. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Winifred. Thank you so much. We can take a couple more questions. As we do that, I will start the poll so that for those of us who can, please complete the poll. Maybe if I'll just get the conversations going. On the 15th of July, we will be having the session on the application of this position paper to our projects and our programs. As we prepare for this, I am just toying with the idea that as we are all caught up with the issue of the girl child, whether we would be interested to do a regional campaign for October 11th on the girl child, because we have enough time from now till October to actually plan something that all Good Shepherd, where Good Shepherd is present in all our countries in Asia Pacific, we could carry a common message. Yeah, so we will discuss this on the 15th of July, just as we did with the child safeguarding last year when we did one common session, each country taking a day during the 16 days of no violence to the girl, to women and children. So maybe this year we could concentrate on October 11, and in all our countries we carry the same common message. So I encourage you to think about this when we come together again on the 15th of July. We could perhaps, as a region, decide on one common message to advocate for the girl child. Okay. I'd like to ask if anyone has any other questions or any questions for Winifred. Now is the opportunity.
Hi, I'm Sashi. I just have a remark about how sex education should be conducted for students and girls and boys at all levels. Often when we teach the children body parts, it's just out there, up here, and the sacred part, and that's how we're teaching children. So much so that they are not even aware of what is being cut. The cutting refers to which part is not even identified, even when they are grown women. So I think sex education, by teaching the children from a very young age the right body parts to identify and themselves, and learn to respect that in the other human being, be it the girl or the boy, is very, very important. And we need to step up our style of communicating in the name of sex education. I think this will, it requires a lot of breaking of barriers, even in our own mindsets, because often we do not address the right body parts when we speak to any person. And that's why something like FGM can still be FGM and not really expanded to the right body part. This is my thought. Thank you.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you,
Agreed.
Sashi.
Totally.
I just want to share an insight to what Sashi just said. Many years ago, we had a session on protecting the children, save and protect the child. And we ourselves as change makers had to go through the whole program. And for some of us, it triggered trauma from our own childhood. And many of us could not even say the word vagina, and it starts with the self. And thank you, Sashi, for saying that, because many times we teach the children head and shoulders, knees and toes, and we leave out the parts between the shoulders and the knees, and that's the most important part of any human body. Thank you so much. Any other reactions? If there are no more reactions, we would like to thank Winifred for this really, really very rich and very insightful session. It has opened up our minds. The girl child is everywhere in our midst, and yet we do not see the issue, and we do not realize the magnitude of the issues that violence against the girl child bring towards the larger society. Very much unlike migration of human trafficking, which happens outside of us. But the girl child is an issue which is within us, because we are all women, and most of our work centers around violence against women and children. And it's all part of our psyche and all part of our system. So we welcome you to our next webinar, which is on July the 15th, where we will talk about the application of this paper onto our programs and our projects. And we will also bring Winifred back to us on perhaps July the 30th, because the 31st of July is a public holiday in most Muslim countries. July the 30th, we will come back for the next position paper. And perhaps the next position paper could be on prostitution.
Okay.
Okay. Because it's an issue that we're also struggling with. Yeah. With this, I want to thank everybody for participating in this webinar and for participating in the poll as well. It has been a very, very rich session. We thank you for, being with us. With that, thank you, everyone. I just ask you to unmute your mics and say goodbye in your own language. And we'll see each other again on the 15th.
Yes.
Bye.
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 Thank you very much. Selamat berjumpa.